Progress.
Okay, we're up to Daf Samach Zayin Amin Aleph, we're at the top of the Amid. Now, the last thing the Gemara talked about is whether Trumas and Meisers that of produce that's owned by a guy, of whether it's Chayiv, and we said it's a Machlekes Tanoim. The Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda hold that it's Potter, that it's Chayiv, and the Shimon and Rav Yosi hold that it's Potter. When it comes to belong to a Beis HaMikdash, we said Kemat everyone, maybe one opinion in Rav Akiva, but Roiv Shitas hold that if it belongs to the Beis HaMikdash, there's no Chiyav Meiser. But if it belongs to a guy, it's a Machlekes Tanoim. That's by Trumas and Meisers. The question is, what about Chala? What about Chala? Chala that's owned by the Beis HaMikdash, and Chala that's owned by a guy. So the Gemara starts off. Now Chala is Chayiv. The time that it's Chayiv is when you turn it into a dough. Gilgal is when you turn it into dough. Meaning, if you have flour and water, that's not Chayiv and Chala. It's Chala when you turn into a dough. So says the Mishnah, says the Gemara, Gilgal Hegdish Poiter. If the dough belongs to the Beis HaMikdash, meaning if the Beis HaMikdash owns it at the time where it becomes dough, when the Chiyav should be Chal, it's Potter. So that means, it says the Gemara, it's not as the Mishnah says. The Mishnah says it pretty much. Hegdisha Isasa Achloi Gilgala Upadasa Chayeves. If I makdish the ingredients and then I redeem it before it's a dough, so when it's a dough, I already own it because I had already redeemed it, then it's chayiv, because it was not owned by the Beis HaMikdash when it was turned into a dough. Or mishagilgal upadasa, or if I already made it a dough as a private citizen, then I magdish it, then I redeem it, it's also chayiv, because at the time that it was a dough, it was owned by me. But hekdishat shalei gilgal of a gilgal gizbar. But if I was magdish the ingredients, and the gizbar, the head of the Beis HaMikdash, turned it into a dough, the halacha is patura. Even if I were to redeem it afterwards, it's pater, because it was owned by the Beis HaMikdash when it was turned into a dough. It is shebeshas chayvasa haisa patura. So that's the opinion of the Gemara. Fine, good. So mafurish, if the Beis HaMikdash owns it as a dough, it's pater. The shaila, what we're going to be dealing with until the end of this amid, is what if it's? I'll just say it all outside. It's much easier. What if it's owned by a guy? A guy owns a dough, and he makes it into a dough, is a chiyav of chala. Now, the Gemara, we said yesterday, whether a guy owns produce, whether it's chayav trumas and meisus, is a machlekes tanoim. So the Gemara wants to know, basically the Gemara is going to have a mafurish mishnah, that if a guy owns chala, it's potter. There's no such thing as chala by a guy. It's mafurish. The shaila is that tolu in yesterday's machlekes? Meaning, is it that when the Mishnah says potter, it's dafka, the shitas that held yesterday, potter by trumas and meisus, potter by chala? But if you hold chayiv and trumas and meisus, you'd hold chayiv and chala, or perhaps no. Perhaps trumas and meisus is a machlokes, but chala is universally accepted it's not. So the mefurish in the Mishnah is that chala by a guy is potter. There's no chala by a guy, there's no chiv of chala. The shaila is that universally accepted, or is that a machlokes tanoim? So says the Gemara, boy, Rava has the following shaila. What is chala by a guy? Is it chayiv? So the question the Gemara wants to know, well, what's your shaila? It's mefurish in Mishnah that it's potter. Mishnah tana, it's mefurish in the Mishnah. What does the Mishnah say? Gershon is gayer. If someone converts and he had made a dough when he was a guy, it's potter. Because at the time when it was a dough, he was a guy. It's potter. Mefurish that gayish dough is no chal. But nishris gayer chayiv. If he made the dough after he converted, then he's chayiv because he's a Jew. So it's mefurish in the Mishnah that it's potter by a guy. Now Suffolk, let's say he doesn't remember if he made it when he was a Jew, when he was a guy, or now that he's Jewish. So then chayiv. I mean Suffolk derai, so you have to separate chala obviously without a bracha. Fine. So what's Rava Shaila? Rava Shaila is, who authored this opinion? Is this universally accepted? Meaning, we had yesterday a machlokes tanoim by truma of a guy. Do we say by truma is a machlokes, but by this it's universally accepted as no chala? Or no, it's totally in the same machlokes. He speaks it out. Hi man katanila. Divrei hakoli. Option number one is that it's universally accepted as no chiyav of chala. Why? By truma there's opinions. Rabbi and Rabbi Yehuda hold that you're chayiv. Truma is different. Why? Even though Rabbi and Rabbi Yehuda hold that there's a chiyav of truma by a guy, Hasam patri hacha, but over here it's different. Why? Hasam who, because by truma dichsev degancha, it says degancha twice. Now degancha implies not a guy, but it says it twice. Anytime it says it twice, that means it's like a double negative, which comes a positive. So you're memayit goyish grain twice, which actually becomes a ribui. So that's why they hold, meaning, very simple. The reason why they hold that a goyish grain is chayiv is because there's a special drasha to include it. We don't have said drasha by challah. There's an extra word degancha to include a goy. By challah, it says arisayischem twice, but there's no extra one. One is to tell you that to exclude a goy, and one is to tell you the shear for challah, that it has to be the amount that they had of the mun, whatever, 5 pounds, 3 pounds, whatever the shear is. The point is, it could be that although they hold that Trumas and Maisis is chayiv, they'll pater by challah, because the drasha, they don't have the drasha to include it. Hasam hu dichsiv degancha yisei, Rabbi mi'at achamiyat, ve'mirach amir l'rabis. Over there, degancha twice is to include a guy. Afil evikachavim. Aval hacha, but over here there is no. It says trei zimni arisasum ksiv. It says arisasum twice, 2 of your doughs. Chad arisaschem kidei asaschem. One is to tell you the shear, which the Gemara darshans in another place that it's the shear. It's 5 pounds, whatever it is. It's the same amount that they made of the mun. That's one arisaschem, and the second arisaschem is chad arisaschem v'lo yisas evikacham v'lo yisas hegdish, and one is to exclude a guy. So option number 1 is that it's universally accepted. Oidilma Rav Yossi Rishimin Ketanala Avra Meir to Kapatri Avra Meir Rav Yehuda Gami Reishis Mehasam, or perhaps no. Perhaps this Mishnah that says that Goyish Chala is Potter is Dafka according to the opinions that Truma's Goy is Potter, because they compare Truma to Chala. But if you hold the Truma is Chayiv, then Chala would also be Chayiv. So the question is Chala contingent on Truma or not? So, Amir Rava here, that was Rava Shaila. Then Rava answered. And Rava said the following: Yehei Rava, it should be the will of Hashem, dachzizi b'chalma. I hope that he told me in my dream. Rava davened that he should get the answer in a dream, which is interesting. Hadam Rava, and then Rava concluded like this. Rava decided this is the psak. Man da Amar miruach avikhavim poiter, give avikhavim poiter. Man da miruach avikhavim ene poiter, give avikhavim ene poiter. It's totally. If you hold yesterday that Shum is chayiv, you hold Chala as Chayiv. If you hold Truma as Potter, you hold Chala as Potter. Meaning, Rava is now being Mechadish that there are opinions that hold that Chala v'Goy is Chayiv. It's contingent on Truma. It's mamish totally on each other. It's not universally accepted. It's totally in Truma. Good. That's Rava's conclusion. Let me say outside what we're going to do, and the Gemara is going to say like this. Here's the problem, though. The problem is Rava is saying that it's totally zebezeh, but we have brises that seem to show that it's not totally zebezeh. Meaning we have brises that seem to indicate that Chala is Potter, but Truma is Chayiv, which Rava says it's not. Rava's whole point is that Chala and Truma are the same. But we're going to have brises that indicate they're not the same. 2 brises. Says the Gemara, Eisvir of Pablo Rava, question number 1. The brisa says, Oivik Kechavim shehivrish petach hamar. If Oivik Kechavim separated a petach hamar, he tried to do the process of petach hamar, which the redeeming the first sheep by a donkey. Now, meaning you redeem the donkey for a sheep. A guy tried to do this, or the chala, or a guy separated chala. My DNA say we tell him shu pater. We tell him there's no such thing. Meaning, what you see from this brisa mefurish is that if a guy separates chala, it's not effective. There's no such thing as goyish chala. So if a guy makes dough, it's pater. The chala say nechalas lizarim, and the chala can be eaten by non-kehanim because it's not chala. Okay. Upetach hamar guys is vayvid by, and the petach hamar has no kedusha. So this brisa clearly states that there is no chala by a guy. But then the deduction is hatrumasa yasura. The implication is that dafka chala doesn't exist, but truma does. So this brisa seems to show that there is truma, but no chala. I thought Rava said that's not a thing. I thought Rava's whole point is they're totally zebezeh. If there's truma, there's chala. If there's no truma, there's no chala. But this brisa seemed to indicate, meaning according to Rava, chala no, that means truma no. The problem is this brisa seems to say chala no, but truma yes. So it seems to be a problem. That's question number 1. So you see, it's not totally zebezeh. That's question number 1. Question number 2, it's the exact same thing, just from a different brisa. Ravina asked Rava another kasha. If I separate chala in Eretz Yisrael, utrumasai b'chutz laaretz, or truma in chutz laaretz, so chala in Eretz Yisrael or truma in chutz laaretz, my DNA says shu pater. We tell the guy there's no such thing. So this brisa clearly states chala is not effective by a guy, And truma is not effective if it's in Chutz La'aretz. But if it's truma in Eretz Yisrael, there is such a thing by a guy. So you had another brisa that seems to show that truma and challah are unrelated. Chalos in echal sazom truma in das. Ha truma Eretz Yisrael midamas. Ha haytan midameruach havichav mene pater givakav pater. So we're back to the original problem, which is Rava said that challah and truma are totally zebazeh. The problem is these brises seem to indicate that challah, there is no challah, but there is truma. I thought they're totally zebazeh. So you know the Gemara answers? The Gemara answers like this. Really, on a biblical level, they're totally zebazeh. Meaning, midiraisa, Rav is right. That according to Rav Shimon and Rav Yossi, there is no challah, there is no truma. If you hold there's no challah, there's no truma. Min HaTorah, there's no challah, there's no truma. This brisa, though, this brisa indicates that there's truma. The answer is midrabanan. Meaning, according to Rava, we have to now revamp a little bit. According to Rava, this is the conclusion. According to Rav Meir and Rav Yehuda, there's truma and there's challah. But let's put them aside. What does Rav Shimon and Rav Yossi say? According to Rava, Rav Shimon and Rav Yossi say there is no challah and there is no truma of a guy. Min HaTorah. But there's truma derabanan. Now, why would they do this? Meaning, according to these brises that indicate that there's truma, it's midirabanan, meaning midiraisa, Rav is right. Midiraisa, there's no challah, and there's no truma. The brisa indicates that there's truma, it's derabanan. Derabanan, there's truma, meaning if a guy owns trumas, fruits and vegetables, whatever, you have to separate truma derabanan. Not challah, but midirabanan you have to separate truma. So when the brisa says truma, it's only derabanan. The question is, why would there be a truma derabanan? And this is very practical. Chazal understood, they knew the games that people can play, and Chazal understood the following. They have to make a rabbinic truma for the following reason. Let's say you own a giant silo of fruits and vegetables, grains, thousands and thousands of dollars. You got to separate a lot of trumas and maises. Trumas and maises is a decent amount. It's 2% and it's 12%, basically. It's 12%. It's a lot of money. Here's what you do. I'm going to sell it to my partner who's a guy. Truma of a guy is pater. So Chazal said, no. Min HaTorah, it's pater. But the Rabbanon, you have to separate it in order to prevent games. So really, challah, there's no challah. And there's no truma, deraisa. But there's truma derabbanon. And the reason why they made it truma derabbanon is to avoid people playing games. Because if I know that if it belongs to a guy, it's entirely pater, I'm just going to sell all of my produce to my partner. It's technically gayish owned. He'll do meruach, he'll do the finishing touches. I'll buy it back from him, and I'll say, it was owned by a guy at the time. I'll say, no. Even if it's owned by a guy, there's a chiyuv d'rabbanan truma to stop games. Notice, though, there's no stopping games. There was no takana by challah. Meaning, Chazal made a takana to prevent games, to prevent shtick. By truma, they were concerned about shtick, but they were not concerned about shtick by challah. Why? The Gemara will address in a second. Says the Gemara, midrabanan. Really, midaraisa, Rav is right. That there is no challah, there's no truma. The brisa indicates that there's truma. The answer is that's derabanan. Why? Gezer mishum bali kisin. It's gezer because of wealthy people. And Rashi has two pshatim. We're going to go second pshat of Rashi, and that is wealthy people are going to try to play shtick. They're going to sell all their produce to a guy, and then the guy will do the finishing touches, and then it's pater. In order to prevent this game of avoiding trumas and meiseris, they made a rabbinic trumas and meiseris on produce owned by a guy, but they did not make said takana by challah. Why not? So says the Gemara, go to the next page. If you're worried about shtick, if you're worried about people playing games, so why aren't they going to do the same thing with challah? I have a giant bakery. I'm going to sell all my challah, all my dough to a guy. He'll make it into dough, and it'll be the same shtick. The same way you were worried about shtick by trumas and meises, why are you not worried shtick about guy? I'll tell you why. So the Gemara says very simple. You could avoid, if you want to be a bad guy, right? What are you concerned about? You're concerned about a guy playing shtick, being, haram, playing games. Trumas and meisers, there's a legitimate concern that someone's going to play games. There's no concern by challah. I'll tell you why. If you want to play games, you could play games. It's very simple. Just make the doughs less than 5 pounds. If you want it, meaning, if you're objective, you can make all the takanas you want. You can't avoid, if you're concerned about people playing games by challah, the takanas won't help. Because there are always ways to avoid it. You could always just do the technicalities. I can make every dough 2.5 pounds, and don't put them on the same table, and I've avoided the concern. Because there are ways out, we're not concerned about playing games, because also, you're either concerned or you're not. But by truma There's truma. There's no other way. Meaning, if there was just a one, it's like if there was like the border. If there was one hole in the fence, we would block it up. By trumas and maasros, there's one hole in the fence, and that is giving to a guy. So we're going to block it up. But by challah, there are other holes. The other hole is you could always just make it less than 5 pounds. Huh? No. So obviously, listen. Back then. I know, but back then they didn't have these giant bakeries with these giant things. They were concerned that, you play little games. The answer is, if you want to play games by challah, you can always play big games by challah. There's no reason for make a takana. We have to just trust you because even with the takana, it's not going to prevent all the opportunities. But Trumas and Maasros, there is no other opportunity for shtick. The only opportunity for shtick is this. So we'll put our foot down. Says the Gemara, you can make it less than the shear. And therefore, because there are other opportunities to play shtick, even beheter, we're not going to be able, we're obviously not concerned about it, because even if we are concerned about it, there's no purpose, because we're not going to be able to stop all the shtick games. But the only shtick by Trumas and Maasros is giving it to a guy. Is that true? I thought there's one other major shtick by Trumas and Maasros. If you remember, there's a Gemara that said that the difference between this generation and the previous generations is that this generation, they used to bring the fruits and vegetables through the sunroof. Remember, there's only chiyuv of Trumas and Maasros when it's finished if it was brought from the field into the house through the front door. It's due to technicality. If you bring it through the sunroof or through windows, it's actually pater. So you're saying there's no other shtick, and therefore we're going to stop it because this is the only shtick. That's not true. You could bring it through the window. Says the Gemara, Trumanami, there's other shtick that you could do it, and therefore there's no purpose to make the kana because there's another shtick also. Rav Ashi says that if a person wants to play games, he could bring his grain, bring it into the house while it still has its chaff on. Meaning, if you bring it to the house still covered in chaff, then it's technically not chayv Trumas Maasros deraisa. Or if you bring it through the window or through the sunroof, it's technically pater min hatayra. Whatever the cheshbon is. So that's a game. So why you're saying there's no other shtick? That's a shtick. And the answer is that's a shtick that's embarrassing. That's a shtick that everybody sees. That's people. We're not concerned about that. That doesn't really count because while it is an option, that's embarrassing to people. See people to have your neighbors see you lowering your grain down through the sunroof. It's not embarrassing. That enough is a prevention. But outside of that, there is no other shtick that you could do without being caught, except for the guy, so we're going to stop it. But by challah, the concern of the other shtick by challah is I'll just make less than 5 pounds, less than 3 pounds. That's not, first of all, it's not embarrassing, and it's in my kitchen. Nobody sees it. Not like I have to run through the, and therefore, because that's a legitimate option, we're not going to make takanas. Says the Gemara, Hasan befarhesia, zila be'milsa, hacha betzina, loy zila be'milsa. Okay, let's just go weiter. The Mishnah now is going to talk about the Omer. Again, the Omer was brought on the second day of Pesach, the first day of Chol Hamoed, and the Omer was mater chadash. Now, once they bring the carbon Omer, all chadash grain is permissive. So says the Mishnah, now the Omer was a mincha. So bala isaron, they take the isaron of barley flour that they prepared in the previous Mishnah. Nasan, shimnai, v'levnasai, they put oil and the levina. Yatsak ubala, they put the flour in, they pour more oil. And now, by the way, the Rambam explains this. According to the Rambam, the Mishnah's actual order is a little bit out of order. They actually put the oil in, they put the flour in, they put more oil in, they mix it together, then they put the levina on the side, because according to, it sounds like from the Mishnah, they put the shemen and levina all mixed together. It's not true. The levina was actually on the side, because you're not allowed to have any of the levina in the kmitza. So they would actually make it into like a mush, and then put the levina sort of next to it on the side. Okay. Kamatz v'hikter, they do kmitza, hikter, v'hashar nechla kehanim. So they do the heinif, they do hagasha, they do kamatz v'hikter, and the rest is eaten by the kehanim. Now, let's say they do this 11 o'clock in the morning, first day Chol Hamoed. I'm picking a time, 11 o'clock in the morning. Now, at that moment, all the chadash is now mutter. So you'd expect they would go out, make flags, make announcements. Chadash is mutter. Now, mishakar v'omer. Now, here's the thing. Apparently, at 11 o'clock in the morning, and you could totally see this, if anyone who's been to like Yerushalayim, like the Shuk, by 11 o'clock in the morning, when they would go out to announce that the Omer was brought, you could already find the marketplace was filled with grain that they had been making, like in prep. So like the bakers are like making chadash, they're making everything ready, they're toasting the grain, they're making everything ready, and then the second it's go, they're like, banana, they're already like selling it. So the question, it's like a pizza shop Matzah Pesach, except in Queens. So the question is, it's a mamish telling the shayla. The question is whether it was Baratz and Chacham. The question is, were the Chazal comfortable with this arrangement of people selling it right away? Did the Vat shut them down? So it says in the Mishnah, Mishkar of Omer, Yoitzin Umoitzin Shuk Yerushalayim. The second the Omer was already brought, you could fill, at that moment, you could go outside and find the Shuk in Yerushalayim, Mole Kemach Kli, filled with oven-dried grain from the Chadash. Right away, it was already there. Now, says Rameir Shaloi Baratz Chacham. Rameir says no good, meaning this was against Chazal. Why? You say, why? What's the difference? They're only selling it after the Omer. The answer is Chazal were afraid that while the baker is preparing it, he might munch on it. So the concern is not that they'll sell too early. They were makbid, they were mashkichim to make sure that it wasn't sold early. But it was shaloi b'ratz chachamim because we're concerned that while you're oisik in it, you might come to eat it. Comes Rav Yehuda, no b'ratz chachamim. Rav Yehuda says, no, we're not concerned you're going to eat it, it's fine. Interesting, and this is going to take us, I'd like to maybe try to get to the next mission. It'll take us about 7 minutes. Here's the thing. So you have a machlokes between Rameir and Rav Yehuda, whether selling the grain at the time is baratz and chachamim or shaloi baratz and chachamim. Rameir says it's shaloi baratz and chachamim because we're concerned that you'll come to eat the grain while you're preparing it. And Rav Yehuda says, no, we're not going to be concerned that you're going to eat the grain. So according to Rav Yehuda, we are not concerned that me being oisik and toasting the grain, I'm going to eat the grain. Here's the thing though, that's not consistent with Rav Yehuda's shita regarding Pesach. It's coming up on Pesach, it always comes out that way. So it says the Gemara, I have a contradiction in Rav Yehuda. What's the contradiction? This Mishnah says that Rav Yehuda said that you could prepare the Chadash before the Omer was brought to be ready to sell right away. We're not concerned you're going to eat it. But here's the problem, or mini, Rav Yehuda Omer, Boitkin or Babasar Shachar Subashas Bior. Rav Yehuda believes there's no such thing as bedikas chametz on Pesach. Right? We paskin that if you go to a hotel, whatever, you go to a place on Pesach, you rent a place on Pesach, Chol Moed, you have to do bedikas chametz on Chol Moed. Why? Because you can't own chametz. So the whole Indian, you have to do bedika. That's how we paskin. Rav Yehuda was against doing bedika on Pesach. Why? Because he said the concern is you'll find something, you'll eat it. So here's the problem. Again, what Rav Yehuda shita you actually do? Okay. You put up a fence, whatever it is. The point is, the Chum disagree. But according to Rav Yehuda, we don't allow bedikas chametz on Pesach because you'll come to eat it. So how come he's concerned of eating it by chametz, but he's not concerned of eating it by chadash? What's the difference between chadash, where there is a concern, where there's no concern? Rav Yehuda believes that it was baratz and chachamim. We're not concerned you're going to eat the chadash. No concern by chadash, but concern by chametz. Chametz problem, chadash no problem. What's the difference? That's the Gemara Shaila. It's going to take us, if you guys don't mind, I'm just going to quickly get to the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, Omer Rabba, Shani Chadash, I'll tell you the difference. Rav Yehuda is concerned by Chametz, but he's not concerned by Chadash. Why? Shani Chadash, Metoich Shla Hitartale, De Kitov Zacharhu. The halacha is that although they allowed the market people to sell Chadash, the second it was over, the second it was brought, there's a halacha. When you pluck the stalks before the omer is brought, you're not allowed to use a regular sickle. You have to use it by hand. Chazal made it that if you're oisik in the crops before the omer is brought, you cannot cut the stalks from the ground in the normal way. You have to pluck it by hand. You have to use a shinoi. So says Rav Yehuda, by chametz I'm concerned because there's no shinoi. But over here, you already have to do a shinoi. Chazal dictated that there's a shinoi. So I'll allow the markets to be filled with it because I'm not concerned they're going to eat it because they had to pluck it from the ground with a shinoi. And the shinoi will remind you. So says the Gemara, there's a shinoi by the plucking, but in the marketplace they're not plucking. They're grinding and they're baking. Where's the shinoi for that? Well, it might be the same guy, but it's not. But he might have. So he did a shinoi. First of all, it doesn't have to be the same guy, but also even if it's the same guy, he did a shinoi 3 days ago. But today there's no shinoi. When he's grinding and sifting, what's the shinoi? The answer is you have to do a shinoi them too. Says the Gemara, halakasha tchina berecha dedayu. Grinding you had to do with a hand mill. You couldn't use a machine. And harkada al geminafa. And sifting you had to do on the back of the sieve. You have to use a backward sieve, meaning there were shinuyim by the every stage. Okay. Here's the problem. Says the Gemara, Beis Hashlachin, Desharya Katsira, Ditanan Kaitzin Beis Hashlachin Shemamakin. Avalei Goitshin Michael Amemar. The problem is that if you have an irrigated field, irrigated fields, which are not, they don't get enough rain from rainwater, they had to do irrigation. Those fields apparently did not give off the greatest crops, and those crops were not going to be used in the Beis HaMikdash anywhere for the Omer. You could actually pluck them regular. Meaning there were certain types of, it's not for now, but you were able to actually, meaning Chazal only made it that you have to use a shinoi on the grain that can be used in the Beis HaMikdash. This inferior grain you could actually do regular. So here's the shaila. If there's no shinoi by then, back to the original question. How come Chadash, Rav Yehuda is not concerned, but Chametz is? And don't tell me the shinuyim, because not all grain requires a shinoi. So you know what the Gemara answers? Elam Rabaya, Chadash badal minei, Chametz loy badal minei. The answer is, people are more concerned about Chadash than Chametz. Now, not because of the severity, but practicality. I'm eating bagels up to Erev Pesach. I'll just continue eating bagels. Chadash, I have not been eating Chadash yet. It's not part of my, my routine. So I'm not concerned that you'll start eating Chadash 10 minutes early. By Chametz, there's a practical concern because I never stopped. But by Chadash, I have not started. That's the difference. That's a bias take. Now, just to finish up to the Mishnah, okay, that's a good answer. Here's the problem. Rava responds to him, Rav Yehuda, the Kasha, the Rabbanan, the Kasha. What about the Rabbanan? Meaning, we've answered Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda was a stira because Rav Yehuda said, Chametz, problem, Chadash, no problem. So we answered it very nicely, and that is, Chametz you've been eating consistently, the concern is you'll continue, but Chadash not. You answered Rav Yehuda. What about the Rabbanan? What are the Rabbanan? The Rabbanan say Chametz no problem, but Chadash problem. Meaning it's the same way it's a steer in Rav Yehuda, it's a steer in the Rabbanan also. How do you reconcile Rav Meir? Rav Meir says that Chametz, that Chadash is a problem, we're afraid you're going to eat it, but Chametz not. So what's going on? So says the Gemara, Amar Rava, Rav Yehuda Rav Kasha Kedushanina. We already answered Rav Yehuda. What about the Rabbanan? The Rabbanan like Kasha, who atzim mechazer lev lusarfa mechal achaminei. Rava says it's very simple. The Rabbanan are also consistent. What's the problem? The Rabbanan say that Chadash you're not allowed to deal with because we're afraid you'll eat it. But Chametz you could do b'dikas Chametz. Oh, it's a stira. Why aren't you afraid you're going to eat it? So Rava says, I'm doing b'dikas Chametz to get rid of it. I'm actively trying to destroy it. I'm not concerned I'm going to eat it. Meaning, in the case of the Chadash, I'm trying to sell it, so I'm into it. So of course I'll eat it. But Chametz, what are you concerned about? Then while I'm doing a b'dikas Chametz on Pesach to get rid of all the Chametz, I'm going to eat it? It's the opposite. I'm trying to get rid of it. I'm not going to start eating it. That's the last answer, and the Gemara just gives one more attempt at an answer, but the Gemara rejects it. Rav Ashi Amar, to Rav Yehuda Kasha, I have another answer for Rav Yehuda. Again, what's the contradiction? Rav Yehuda says you're not allowed to handle do b'dikas Chametz because we're afraid you'll eat the Chametz, but Chadash he's not concerned. What's the difference? Why Chadash no concern, but Chametz yes? See, he says, I'll tell you why. Kelach Kani Tanan. They were selling in the marketplace. They were selling roasted grain. Apparently, roasted grain is not edible at that stage. So it's very simple. Normally, there's a concern you'll eat it. By Chametz, there's no concern by Chadash because it's not edible at that stage. Like the most obvious answer possible. They were selling inedible flour at the time. The Gemara responds, and we'll end with this, Rav Ashi Bedusi. Rav Ashi's answer is incorrect. Why? How do you get it to that inedible stage? Meaning the way flour works is that it's edible when it's raw. Then when you toast it, it becomes inedible, and then you have to bake it. So they were selling it toasted. So, it's not edible. But they toasted it, which means when it came into the marketplace, it was edible. You're right, when they were selling it in the actual front of their stand, it wasn't edible at that stage because they had toasted it. Apparently it goes raw edible, toasted inedible, baked edible. So they're like, they're selling it was inedible, there's no concern that they're going to eat it. Apparently raw kernels can be chewed on, you could eat raw kernels. Apparently then it becomes toasted kernels, you can't eat it anymore, and then you have to bake it as flour, then it becomes edible again. So Rav Ashi says the reason why there was no concern is because they were selling the inedible stage. Yeah, but the Gemara says it's bedusi, it's incorrect. Why? Ad kali ma'ikal memar. How do you think it got toasted? It came in raw, it came in edible. They made it like it was edible when they got their hands on it. So it must be Rav Ashi is incorrect. We have to go with the previous answers that we stuck with. I will stop it.